Making a cheddar broccoli soup is incredibly easy using your slow cooker. And you could set it up before you go to work and let it cook all day so you have dinner ready when you get home, or you can make it in as few as 2 hours. Welcome to The Salted Pepper, where we cook for real life, using real food, and we keep it real simple. Today we're going to make a delicious and easy cheddar broccoli soup. I'm using the Ninja Possible Cooker Pro, which is a slow cooker, so we're going to use the slow cook function. We're going to use high slow cook for this, and I'm going to get into the reasons behind that in just a minute. So the first thing we want to do is turn the Possible Cooker Pro on. Now, if you have the sear saute function on your appliance that you're going to slow cook with, you can do all this in one pot. If not, fortunately, you're going to have to make the roux in a pan on the stove, but it's super easy to do. And I'll go over how to do that in just a second. I'm going to go to sear saute on high and hit start. There is a preheat period, and I usually let it get about 75% preheated before I add in the butter. The butter is the first ingredient that we're going to use to make the roux. A roux is a combination of equal parts fat and flour. I'm using butter in this instance, but you could certainly use oil if you wanted to. I just think butter brings a better flavor to the dish. Now, if you have a slow cooker that does not have the ability to sear saute, then you're going to want to do this part on the stove in a little pan. And it only takes a few minutes. Heat your pan to about medium high, add in your butter, then add in your flour, and mix it together and cook it for about 2 to 3 minutes. That's exactly what I'm going to do in the Possible Cooker Pro, so you can see how quick it is to get it done. Now, the reason I use a roux in this soup is because I like the added thickness. We do have cheese in here, and cheese will thicken it, but it didn't thicken it enough unless you add so much cheese that it is pretty much a cheese soup with a little bit of broccoli. And I didn't want that. I wanted the flavors to be balanced. So we're gonna start with the roux. Start off with 4 tablespoons of salted or unsalted butter. I prefer using salted, and I adjusted the salt content based on salted butter, but you can always season at the end as well. Once the butter starts to melt, we're gonna move it around in the pan, and then we're gonna add 4 tablespoons of flour, and we're gonna create a loose paste that we cook for 2 to 3 minutes. And 4 tablespoons of all-purpose flour that I just sort of broadcast evenly over the top of the butter, or maybe not so evenly sometimes. And then incorporate the two together. And just as it starts to form this loose paste, I like to add in the garlic, salt, and pepper. So I'm gonna do that right now. I have 1 teaspoon of fine grind sea salt, or you could use kosher salt, and 1/2 of a teaspoon of black pepper, and 1 teaspoon of freshly minced garlic, which for the size cloves that I had was 3 cloves of fresh garlic. And then move this around. Now you could add in your onions right now if you wanted to, but I don't find that much benefit in sauteing the onions before we build the rest of the soup. So I don't usually bother. I just add them in raw after I get the roux finished. All right, so once you start to smell the garlic, which happens pretty quickly, cook the roux another 2 minutes, but stir it frequently. And if you think it's getting too dark, turn your heat down. So you can go down to low sear saute at this point if you want to. All right, so the roux is starting to get dark. I don't want it to become a really dark roux because remember, this is a cheddar broccoli soup. We don't want it to look dark in color. We want it to be kind of a yellowish color. So we don't want this to get too dark. So add in your 4 cups of chicken broth, which is what I recommend. You could use vegetable broth though if you want to. If you want to keep it vegetarian, that would be fine. All right, we're gonna go ahead and stir this in. All right, your mixture will start to thicken, but just slightly, and that's perfectly fine. Now what we're gonna do is switch over to slow cook. So I'm gonna turn this off, turn it back on. Slow cook on high is what we want, and we're gonna hit start. 6 hours is the default. I am gonna change that in just a minute though, and I'm gonna talk about why I'm picking high, why the timing, and all that kind of stuff. But first, let's go ahead and get in the onions. This is one medium-sized sweet onion that is chopped in 1/4 inch dice. I do recommend using a smaller dice in this. You don't want big chunks of your onion, when you're eating your broccoli soup. And then the broccoli. I have 12 ounces of broccoli florets here. So if you're getting a whole head of broccoli, you're gonna wanna get about 1 pound because you're not gonna use the stalk part. Or you could slice the stalk up really thinly and put it in the soup. And it does add another dimension, it adds another little bit of crunch. And that's why I do leave some of the stalk on the broccoli before I put it into the pot to slow cook. I also don't worry too much about the size, and I'll tell you why. Some are bigger, some are smaller, and that is because it will give you different textures of the broccoli in the soup. The smaller ones are gonna fall apart, like this one is going to become just like specks, but it helps to flavor the soup even more than one that's gonna stay a little bit bigger. Now, none of them will stay this big, so this will break up as it slow cooks, okay? But this one will completely fall apart, but it flavors the soup base. So now we're just gonna throw those in, and I will tell you a little secret, which I don't usually do, but I did this time. I bought the bag of florets that were already cut to make this super easy. So literally I just rinsed them off and threw them in whatever size they were in the bag. They went in the pot, just like that. Give it just a little bit of a stir. And now, this is gonna be surprising. Nothing else goes in right now. It can, and I'll talk about that. But I like it better when I do it this way. Now, it's gonna take 2 hours on high slow cook in the Possible Cooker Pro to get the broccoli to the right consistency that I like, which is tender but not total mush, okay? Because I like a little bit of texture in my cheddar broccoli soup. So 2 hours on high slow cook was optimal. But if you wanna set this up in the morning, because I said you could, you can set it up, adjust your time for 2 hours, and most slow cookers will go over to keep warm after the 2 hours. And I have done it that way. So I've cooked it for 2 hours, but I haven't come back to it for a total of like 6 or 7 hours, even 8 hours would be fine. And on the keep warm function, it does nothing to the broccoli, okay? The broccoli does not overcook. It is wonderful. All right, now, why don't I add the cream and the cheddar cheese? You can, and I've done it that way. And if you're gonna be home and you can get it right at the 2 hour mark, you certainly can add it in. However, it is a little bit different of a texture because especially in this slow cooker, the temperatures get high enough that sort of changes the texture of the cheese a little bit. And I wasn't a huge fan. I found that with letting this base cook, then adding the cheese, which takes 5 minutes at the end, and adding the cream in, really finish the soup. It's super velvety. It's just absolutely thick, rich, and delicious. So this is the way I recommend it. But I have done it the other way where I add in both the cream and the cheese right now and let it cook for 2 hours. Now, I know somebody is gonna ask me, why not go on low for 4 or 6 hours? Wouldn't that be better? No, it's not, especially not in this cooker, and I'll tell you why. And especially if you add in the cream and the cheese. Because the soup base gets too thick, which changes the way the heat conduction works, and the broccoli doesn't cook. And how do I know this? I tried it, okay? I tested it that way. So on low slow cook in the Possible Cooker Pro, it's not a good idea. In a different type of slow cooker that might cook higher temperatures, and don't add in the cream or the cheese, you may be okay with the broccoli. being cooked fine on low. But broccoli is one of those things that you need a temperature of between 180 and 190 degrees for it to even start to cook. So it's not a timing issue, it's a temperature issue. And the thicker your soup base is, or the thicker your liquid is, I'll say for this example, the less heat transfer goes. So when we're making creamy soups like this and we start with a roux, we have a thicker base and it's not going to conduct the heat as well. Now, if you put broccoli in with just plain chicken broth, you could probably cook it fine on low because it's going to reach that 180 degree Fahrenheit mark. But with this soup, the way it is right now, it doesn't work, especially with the cheese and the cream added in. So now we just wait. I'm gonna let it go the 2 hours and then I break up the broccoli a little bit and we're gonna add the final touches and then we'll give it a taste. I've got a special surprise for you because we're gonna put it into a bread bowl. All right, there we go. It's been 2 hours on high slow cook and there's quite a bit of steam coming out and it is boiling inside. And that's one of the reasons why I wait to add the cheese and the cream until after we slow cook in the Possible Cooker Pro especially, because I find that that higher heat will really start to like split the cheese a little bit. It just gives a little bit different texture and a little bit of a different look to the soup. But I've done it both ways. And like I said earlier in the video, it's perfectly fine if you just want to go ahead and add it all in at once. The other thing you could do with the Possible Cooker Pro is to use the braise function. That is a little bit lower of a heat than high slow cook, so you could also do that. Now, I will say that I looked at this soup 1 hour in to the slow cook process. And I felt the broccoli, not with my fingers, but with this, and it was breaking apart. So you could really get this done in 1 hour if you wanted. But this is a 2 hour slow cook on high. Now we are going to add in some cream. I have 1 cup of heavy cream here, but I'm only gonna add in half of a cup right now. This is gonna cool that liquid down a little bit, which is good before you add the cheese. Stir it around. And now we're gonna start adding in the cheese. I have 12 ounces of a sharp shredded cheddar. This is shredded right from the bag. I didn't even shred it myself. Either will work fine for this. And that is about 2.5 cups or so of the cheese. But look, you cannot get too cheesy if you ask me when you're making a cheddar broccoli soup. I like to start out putting in 8 ounces, then I leave the other 4 ounces for garnishing the soup on top. But if you want to dump it all in, you can certainly do that too. Start with 1 handful at a time. And mix it up, and as you mix it up, start to break your broccoli up a little bit. And this looks so good. And you could break your broccoli up, really fine, or you can leave it in chunks. This is looking perfect though. Oh my gosh, perfect. And we just keep going. So I'm gonna put in a total of 2 cups of the shredded cheese and leave about 1/2 cup for garnishing the soup bowls. Now I kept adding in handfuls. Usually I add a handful and then I stir it in, add another handful, but hey, this is working fine too. Oh my gosh, this is glorious looking. This is so beautiful and so creamy. I really recommend that you do it this way and add your cheese at the end because it does make a difference. Oh my gosh, this looks great. Now it's up to you if you want to add in the other 1/2 of a cup of cream or not. It looks beautiful right now, but since I have this out, I'm going to go ahead and just add it in. But that is totally up to you. Wow. This is so beautiful. Oh my gosh. All right, that looks absolutely gorgeous. I'm so excited about it. Now, you can dish it up right away. You can leave it on keep warm. That's perfectly fine. You can put the lid back on and just leave it now on keep warm until you want to serve it. And it is fine for it to stay on keep warm before you add the cheese and the cream too, okay? So like I said, if you're at work or the kids have a game or practice or something, it's perfectly fine to slow cook for 2 hours, then let it go to keep warm for up to 6 hours or so. Now, I've got this beautiful bread bowl. Now, of course, you don't have to use a bread bowl, but I just think there's something about cheddar broccoli soup in a bread bowl that just, I don't know. It is like the perfect meal, right? So we are gonna cut this on the top here, probably about an inch down, but that's really up to you, how tall you want your bread bowl. Then it's important when you're doing a bread bowl that you leave enough of the edge here so that the soup does not start to leak out, right? If you clean out too much of the insides, you're gonna have it start to leak out. So I'm just gonna pull this out a little bit. And this is homemade, of course, because I love to make bread, but I think you can actually buy them in some grocery stores as well. Now, another thing about this, you could break this up, toss it in a little bit of butter and air fry it, like maybe a little seasoning, air fry it and make croutons. Oh my gosh, that would be so good. All right, there we go. We've got that cleaned out here. And of course you can use these bread bowls, which I have the recipe for, and I will link to it right up there. And also it's on my website, thesaltedpepper.com. You could also use these for dip. They work great. All right, here we go. Oh my gosh. This looks so amazing. And then a little bit of cheese on top. And then of course you wanna rip off a little bit of this, dip it in your soup. Oh my gosh, the broccoli is the perfect size. It looks beautiful. Oh my goodness. This is better than any cheddar broccoli soup that I've ever had at a restaurant. I do have a different version on my website for a pressure cook version, but it's different than this. It's delicious, but this is more like, I would say a Panera style, okay? A little cheesier, a little thicker, a little creamier. I love both versions though. Okay. Hands down, this is probably the best soup I've ever had in my life. Enjoy.